I, 28F, thought my mother was just overbearing. I never imagined she was capable of this. The day she took my son, Leo, she left a note on the kitchen counter. It was written on a cheerful yellow sticky note, the kind she used to remind me to buy milk. All it said was, "We needed a little vacation. Be back soon." But I knew. In that single, sickening moment, I knew she wasn't coming back. She had finally done what she had been hinting at for months. She had decided that my 2-year-old son was hers, and she had stolen him. The problem had started small. So small I almost didn't notice it. When Leo was born, my mother, Karen, was a huge help. My husband had left when I was pregnant, and I was navigating motherhood alone. She would come over every day, cook meals, and rock Leo to sleep. I was grateful. I told everyone how lucky I was to have her. But then the little things began. She started referring to my house as our house. She would buy clothes for Leo that were not my style, frilly, old-fashioned outfits, and she would get a wounded look in her eye if I dressed him in anything else. "He just looks so handsome in the things his grandma picks out," she would say. Her voice was always sweet, but there was an edge to it. A warning. Then came the mommy issue. I was in the living room one afternoon, and I heard her in Leo's nursery, cooing to him. "Who's my special boy? Is Mommy's special boy sleepy?" I froze. I walked to the doorway and stood there, my arms crossed. She didn't see me at first. She was stroking his hair, her face filled with an adoration that was almost unnerving. "Mom," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. She looked up, startled. A faint blush rose on her cheeks. "Oh, honey, I was just getting him down for his nap." "You called yourself Mommy," I said. She laughed, a brittle little sound. "Oh, did I? It was just a slip of the tongue. You know how it is. My brain is just so used to that word." But it wasn't a slip. It happened again, and again. Each time I corrected her. Each time she had an excuse. It was a joke. She was tired. She forgot. The final time, I was firmer. We were at the park, and Leo had scraped his knee. He was wailing, and she rushed to him before I could, scooping him up. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy will make it all better." I took him from her arms. His little body was trembling against mine. I looked my mother directly in the eye. "I am his mother," I said. "You are his grandmother. Please stop doing this." Her face changed. The sweet, doting grandmother mask fell away, and for a second, I saw something cold and hard underneath. "I was just trying to comfort him," she said. Her voice clipped. The rest of the day was thick with a tense silence. The confrontation that sealed our fate happened a week before she disappeared with him. She had redecorated his nursery while I was at work. She replaced the modern, minimalist furniture I had chosen with heavy, dark wood pieces. She painted over the soft gray walls with a garish, bright blue. She even replaced the mobile of planets I loved with one of chintzy, smiling farm animals. I walked in and my jaw dropped. "What is this?" I asked. She was beaming, standing in the middle of the room with her hands on her hips. "It's a proper little boy's room. That other stuff was so drab. He needs color." "You had no right to do this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This is my house. He is my son. You don't get to make these decisions." "I was just trying to help," she said, her smile faltering. "You're so ungrateful." "This isn't help, Mom. This is control," I shot back. "You are trying to raise him as your own. It has to stop. You are the grandmother, and that is all you will ever be. You need to accept that." She said nothing. She just stared at me with those cold, flat eyes. There was no apology, no excuse. Just a chilling, silent assessment. That should have been my biggest warning. Her anger I could handle. Her silence was terrifying. She left that evening without another word. The next few days were quiet. Eerily quiet. She was polite but distant. I thought maybe my words had finally gotten through to her. I was a fool. I had not set a boundary. I had issued a challenge, and she had accepted it. The day she took him, she called me in the morning. Her voice was back to its usual syrupy sweetness. Honey, I was wondering if I could take Leo to the zoo today, just for a few hours. It's such a beautiful day. I hesitated. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I was being paranoid. Maybe I had been too harsh on her. Maybe I needed to extend an olive branch. Okay, I said, but have him back by 3. He has his doctor's appointment. Of course, dear, she said. We'll be back in plenty of time. She arrived an hour later, all smiles. She had a little backpack for Leo with his favorite snacks and a new toy car. He was so excited to see her, toddling over to hug her legs. I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was being selfish. I kissed Leo goodbye, told him to have fun, and watched them walk out to her car. She waved brightly as they drove away. The appointment wasn't until 3:30, so I used the quiet time to get some work done. I was a freelance graphic designer and had a deadline approaching. I got lost in my project, the hours slipping by. It was 3:15 when I looked at the clock. A flicker of annoyance went through me. She was going to be late. I sent her a quick text. Hey, hope you had fun. Just a reminder we need to leave for the doctor soon. No reply. I waited 10 minutes. I sent another text. Mom, are you on your way? Still nothing. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. My heart started to beat a little faster. This wasn't like her. She was always glued to her phone. I tried again. Voicemail. I called her house line. No answer. Now the annoyance was curdling into real fear. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car. Her house was only 10 minutes away. Maybe her phone died. Maybe they were just running late. There was a rational explanation for this. There had to be. I pulled into her driveway. Her car was gone. That was good, right? It meant they were still out. But the house had a strange, still feeling about it. I used the spare key she had given me and let myself in. Mom? I called out. Leo? The silence was absolute. I walked through the quiet rooms. The living room was tidy. The kitchen was spotless. Then I saw it. The yellow sticky note on the counter held down by a salt shaker. My blood ran cold as I read the words. We needed a little vacation. Be back soon. I read it again. And again. The words didn't make sense. A vacation? Where? Why? I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. This wasn't a vacation. This was a kidnapping. My own mother had kidnapped my son. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial. I called my dad, David. He was at work. He answered on the second ring. Hey, sweetheart, he said, his voice cheerful. What's up? Dad, I sobbed, the word tearing from my throat. She's gone. Mom's gone, and she has Leo. Whoa, slow down, he said. What are you talking about? Your mother told me she was taking Leo to visit her sister Carol for the weekend. She said you were fine with it. The lie hit me like a physical blow. I had not been fine with it. I had not even been told about it. She lied, Dad. She told me she was taking him to the zoo for a few hours. I have to go to the police. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he sighed, a sound I had heard 1,000 times, the sound of him preparing to make an excuse for her. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. You know how your mother is. She probably just got her wires crossed. She would never, ever hurt Leo. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I shrieked. She took my son without my permission and her phone is off. She left a note, a stupid, cryptic note. This is not a misunderstanding. Just calm down, he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when my mother had pushed me too far. I'll try calling Carol. I'm sure there's a simple explanation for all of this. Don't go running to the police and making a scene. It'll just embarrass everyone. I hung up on him. I couldn't listen to it anymore. Embarrass everyone. That was all he cared about. His wife's reputation, not the safety of his grandson, not the terror of his daughter. I felt a surge of pure, white-hot rage. I was on my own in this. I sank to the floor of my mother's kitchen, the yellow, sticky note crumpled in my fist. And I cried. I cried for my missing son. I cried for the mother I thought I had. And I cried for the terrifying fight that I knew was just beginning. After a few minutes of gut-wrenching sobs, a cold resolve settled over me. Crying wasn't going to bring Leo back. I had to act. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and dialed 911. My voice was surprisingly steady as I told the dispatcher that my son had been taken by his grandmother. They told me an officer would be dispatched to my location, my mother's house. While I waited, I started to search. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't just sit still. I went into her bedroom. It was neat as a pin, the bed made with military precision. Her closet was orderly, clothes hung by color. But something was off. I opened her drawers. Her underwear drawer was half empty. So was her drawer of sweaters. I walked over to her dresser. Her jewelry box was still there, but her favorite silver locket, the one she never took off, was gone. She had packed a bag. This was not a spur-of-the-moment trip. This was planned. I moved to her nightstand. There was a book, a romance novel with a bookmark halfway through. Underneath it was a notepad. Most of the pages were filled with grocery lists and reminders, but the last page was different. It was a list of towns. Small, obscure towns in a state 300 miles away. My breath hitched. Beside one of the towns, she had scribbled a name and a phone number. Pine Ridge Cabins. Just then, a police car pulled into the driveway. A young officer who looked barely older than me got out. I met him at the door, the notepad clutched in my hand. I explained the situation, my voice trembling again. I told him about my mother's behavior, the arguments, the note. I showed him the list of towns. He listened patiently, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said when I was finished, "it sounds like a family dispute. She's the child's grandmother. In these situations, we usually find that they turn up in a day or two once things have cooled down. We can't file a missing persons report for an adult for at least 24 hours. "But she has my son," I cried, my frustration boiling over. "He's 2 years old. This is kidnapping." "Technically, ma'am, without a custody order in place that specifically forbids her from taking the child, it's a gray area," he said, avoiding my gaze. "My advice is to wait. She'll probably call you this evening." He took down my information, gave me a card with a case number on it, and left. I stood on the porch, watching his car disappear down the street, and felt a profound sense of hopelessness. The one person who was supposed to help me had dismissed my fears as female hysteria. It was just a family dispute. I was just an overreacting daughter. My father's words echoed in my head. I was completely and utterly alone. I couldn't stay in my mother's empty house a second longer. It felt suffocating. I drove home, my mind racing. The officer's words had planted a seed of doubt. Was I overreacting? Was she going to call tonight, laughing about the little adventure she and Leo had? But deep in my gut, I knew that wasn't true. The empty drawers, the list of towns, the coldness in her eyes during our last fight. This was real. When I got home, the silence was deafening. Leo's favorite stuffed bear was sitting on the sofa where he had left it. A tiny pair of his shoes was by the door. I picked them up, holding them to my chest, and a fresh wave of grief washed over me. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait. I called my best friend, Sarah. She picked up immediately. As soon as she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. "What is it? What happened?" I told her everything, the words spilling out of me in a frantic, jumbled mess. Unlike my father, unlike the police officer, she didn't doubt me for a second. "Oh my God," she breathed. "That's not a vacation. She stole him. We have to find him." The "we" was what I needed to hear. I wasn't alone anymore. "The police won't do anything," I said, my voice thick with tears. "They said it's a family matter." Then we'll be the police, Sarah said fiercely. What do you know? You said you found a list of towns? Yes, and the name of a cabin rental place, I said, my mind starting to clear. Pine Ridge Cabins. Okay, she said, her voice all business. I'm looking it up now. It's in a tiny town called Oak Haven, about a 5-hour drive from you. It's in the mountains, a perfect place to disappear. A chill went down my spine. Disappear. That was her plan. What do I do? I asked, feeling helpless again. You need to gather more proof, Sarah said. Proof that this was premeditated. The police can't ignore hard evidence. Go back to her house, look at her computer, check her bank statements if you can. Find something that proves she wasn't just going on a little trip. Sarah was right. I needed to build a case. I had to prove to the world that my mother was not a doting grandmother who made a silly mistake. She was a kidnapper. My father called while I was getting ready to go back to my mother's house. I spoke to Carol, he said, and I could hear a forced relief in his voice. Karen isn't there. She never was. See? Just a mix-up. She probably decided to take him somewhere else. Maybe the beach. Dad, she's not at the beach, I said, my voice dangerously low. I found a list of towns in another state. I found the name of a cabin rental company. She packed a bag. This was planned. You're searching her room? He asked, his tone shifting to disapproval. That's an invasion of her privacy. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. An invasion of her privacy? She stole my child. I don't care about her privacy. You are blowing this out of proportion, he insisted. She will call. You need to calm down and stop making these wild accusations. You need to wake up, Dad, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You have enabled her for years. You have let her walk all over me, and now this is where it's led. Your wife has stolen your grandson. And you are still defending her. When I find him, and I will find him, you need to decide whose side you're on. I hung up before he could respond. The lines were drawn. He was with her. Sarah was with me. That was all I needed to know. I drove back to my mother's house, a grim determination setting in. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was a hunter, and I was going to bring my son home. This time, I went straight for her office, a small room off the living room where she paid bills and used her old desktop computer. I turned on the machine, my heart pounding. It was password protected. Of course, I tried her birthday. No luck. I tried my father's birthday. Nothing. I tried her maiden name, the name of her dog who had died years ago, our old street address. Nothing worked. Frustration mounted. I was about to give up when I noticed a small framed photo on her desk. It was of her and me when I was a baby. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a tiny, folded piece of paper. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. On it was written a string of letters and numbers. It was the password. I typed it in, and the computer screen flickered to life. I clicked on the internet browser. The search history was the first place I looked. My stomach twisted as I read the recent entries. Grandmother's rights in this state. Can a grandparent sue for custody? How to legally change a child's name. Jobs in Oak Haven. Apartments for rent in Oak Haven. There it was. Cold, hard proof. She wasn't planning a vacation. She was planning a new life. A new life with my son. I felt sick. I took out my phone and photographed every single search entry. Evidence. This was the evidence the police officer couldn't ignore. Next, I looked for financial records. She had a folder on her desktop labeled Bills. I opened it. There were files for her credit card statements and bank accounts. I clicked on the most recent credit card statement. My eyes scanned the list of charges. Gas station purchase 2 days ago, near the state line. A large purchase at a camping and outdoor supply store last week. A charge for a burner phone. And there it was. A charge from 3 days ago. Pine Ridge Cabins. For a 1-week rental. She had paid for the cabin before she even took him. The lie she told my father, the lie she told me, it was all a carefully constructed plan. I felt a wave of nausea. My own mother had been plotting this for weeks, maybe longer, right under my nose. I photographed the bank statement, my hands shaking so much the first few pictures were blurry. I kept digging. I went through her emails. Most of them were junk mail and newsletters. But then I found a folder labeled Drafts. There was only one email in it. It was addressed to my father. The subject line was, "My reasons." I clicked on it, my heart pounding in my chest. The letter was long and rambling. It was a manifesto of her perceived grievances. She wrote about how I was a neglectful mother, how I didn't appreciate her help, how Leo was unhappy and needed her. She claimed she was not stealing him, but rescuing him. She wrote about her plans to get a job in Oak Haven, enroll him in a local daycare, and raise him the right way. She ended the letter with a chilling line. "By the time you get this, we will be long gone. Do not try to find us. He is my son now." The words blurred through my tears. This was more than I could have imagined. This was a detailed confession. She had written it all down. I photographed the entire email, making sure every word was clear. This was the smoking gun. This was what would bring him home. Armed with my new evidence, I called the police station again. I asked for the officer who had come to the house earlier. He was off duty. I was transferred to a detective. My voice was firm and clear as I explained that I had new, concrete evidence of parental kidnapping. I told him about the computer search history, the credit card charge for the cabin, and the email draft. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Can you bring that evidence to the station?" the detective asked. His tone was different now. Serious. "I'm on my way," I said. Sarah met me at the station. She wrapped me in a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You got what you needed." We sat with Detective Miller for over an hour. I showed him the photos on my phone. He looked at each one carefully, his expression growing more grim. He read the email draft twice. When he was done, he looked up at me. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a look of steely resolve. "This changes everything," he said. "This is no longer a family dispute. This is a felony. We have a location, we have proof of intent. We can act on this." He explained the next steps. He would contact the local police department in Oak Haven. They would work together to go to the cabin. Because she had crossed state lines, the FBI could also get involved. He told me it might take a day or two to coordinate everything. "A day or two?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. "She could be gone by then. She could go somewhere else." "We'll put a watch on her credit cards," he said calmly. "If she uses them, we'll know. And we'll have officers in Oak Haven do a quiet drive-by of the cabin to confirm she's there. We have to do this by the book, ma'am. We have one chance to get this right and bring your son home safely." I knew he was right, but the thought of waiting another minute, let alone another day, was agony. I felt like a coiled spring, vibrating with anxiety and a desperate need to do something. Sarah drove me home. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the sofa, staring at the door, clutching Leo's stuffed bear. Every car that drove by made my heart leap. Every phone call made me jump. My father called again that night. His voice was different. The bluster was gone, replaced by a quavering uncertainty. I got an email from your mother," he said. It was the letter. She must have finally sent it. "I know," I said, my voice flat. I read the draft on her computer. There was a long, heavy silence. I could hear his ragged breathing. "I didn't believe you," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never thought she would—" His voice broke. I felt a flicker of pity for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the fire of my anger. "You should have believed me," I said coldly. "You've been watching her for 30 years. You knew what she was like. You just didn't want to see it." "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice small. There is no we, I said. I am handling this. I have given everything to the police. They are going to get him. I want to help, he said, sounding desperate. It's too late to help, I replied, and I hung up the phone. I couldn't give him the comfort of shared responsibility. He had made his choice when he defended her. He could live with it. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. Detective Miller called in the morning to tell me that the Oak Haven police had confirmed my mother's car was parked outside Cabin 7 at the Pine Ridge Cabins. They were assembling a team. They wanted to go in at dawn the next day when they were less likely to be noticed. He asked if I wanted to be there. Yes, I said without a moment's hesitation. I have to be there. He advised against it, saying it could be emotionally difficult, but I was insistent. I was not going to sit at home while my son was being rescued. Sarah offered to drive me. We left that afternoon, a 5-hour drive into the mountains of another state. We didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say. My entire world had narrowed down to one single point: getting Leo back. We arrived in Oak Haven late that night and checked into a motel on the other side of town from the cabins. I didn't sleep a wink. I just watched the numbers on the clock change, each minute an eternity. At 4:30 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. "It's time," he said. "Meet us at the staging area. I'm sending you the address." The staging area was a deserted parking lot a mile from the cabins. 2 local police cars were there, along with an unmarked car carrying Detective Miller. He got out and walked over to us. His face was grim in the pre-dawn light. "Here's the plan," he said, his voice low. "The local officers will approach the cabin. They will announce themselves and ask her to come out. Hopefully, she'll surrender peacefully. We don't want to alarm the child." He looked at me. "I need you to stay in the car. No matter what you hear, you stay in the car. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He was right. The last thing Leo needed was to see his mother in the middle of a police operation. Sarah squeezed my hand. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. We followed the police cars, stopping about 100 yards from the entrance to Pine Ridge Cabins. From our vantage point, we could just see the small, rustic cabins nestled among the trees. I saw them pull up to Cabin 7. I saw 2 officers get out and walk to the door. Even from this distance, I could feel the tension in the air. I watched them knock. There was no answer. They knocked again, louder this time. "Police, open up!" one of them shouted. Still nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if she wasn't there? What if she had seen them coming and run? Then I saw them use a ram to break down the door. They disappeared inside. The next few seconds stretched into an eternity. I held my breath, straining to hear anything over the sound of my own blood pounding in my ears. Then one of the officers came back out, and he was carrying a small bundle in his arms. It was Leo. He was wrapped in a blanket, his little face confused and sleepy. He was safe. A sob of pure, unadulterated relief escaped my lips. I started to open the car door, but Sarah stopped me. "Wait," she said gently. "Wait until they bring him to you." A few minutes later, the other officer came out and he was escorting my mother. She was in handcuffs. Her face was a mask of disbelief and fury. She saw our car, and her eyes locked on mine. She started screaming, her voice a shrill, ugly sound that cut through the morning quiet. She was screaming my name, screaming that I was a terrible mother, that I had stolen her baby. Detective Miller got out of his car and walked over to her. He said something to her, and she stopped screaming, her face crumpling. They put her in the back of one of the police cars. Then the officer carrying Leo started walking toward us. As he got closer, Leo saw me through the window. His little face lit up. "Mama," he cried, reaching out his arms. The officer opened my door and I stumbled out. I took my son into my arms, burying my face in his soft hair. He smelled like pine needles and stale motel air, but he was here. He was safe. He clung to me, his little hands tangled in my hair. Mama, he whispered again, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I held him tight, rocking him back and forth, the tears I had been holding back for 2 days finally streaming down my face. He was real. He was warm. He was mine. Over his shoulder, I saw the police car carrying my mother pull away. Our eyes met one last time through the back window. The look on her face was not one of remorse or sadness. It was a look of pure, venomous hatred. In that moment, I knew that whatever love I had left for my mother had died. She was a stranger to me now, a monster who had tried to steal my life. The ride back home was a blur. Leo fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the ordeal. I couldn't take my eyes off him, my hand resting on his little leg just to make sure he was real. Sarah drove, her presence a quiet, steady comfort. We stopped once for gas, and I bought Leo a chocolate milk and a donut. He ate it happily in the back seat, chattering about the big trees and the loud men. He was too young to understand what had happened, and for that, I was eternally grateful. When we finally pulled into my driveway, my father was sitting on the front steps. He stood up when he saw us, his face a mess of relief and shame. I got Leo out of the car, and my father took a step toward us. "Is he okay?" he asked, his voice thick. "He's fine," I said, my voice cold. I walked past him and into the house. I could feel his eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I took Leo straight up to his room, the room my mother had so arrogantly redecorated. I would change it back. I would erase every trace of her from this house. Sarah came in a few minutes later with our bags. "Your dad is still outside," she said quietly. "He looks awful." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. I laid a sleeping Leo in his crib and just watched him breathe. Every rise and fall of his little chest was a miracle. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Because she had crossed state lines, it was a federal case. I had to give a formal statement to an FBI agent. I recounted the whole story, from the first time she called herself Mommy to the moment I saw her in handcuffs. It was draining, but every word felt like a small victory, another nail in the coffin of her lies. My mother was charged with felony kidnapping. Her lawyer immediately requested a psychiatric evaluation, claiming she was mentally unstable. They were trying to build an insanity defense. The prosecutor assigned to my case, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, assured me it was a long shot. "We have the email," she told me over the phone. "We have the computer searches, the burner phone, the prepaid cabin rental. This was a calculated, premeditated crime. She knew exactly what she was doing." My father tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. He left long, rambling voicemails, apologizing, begging for my forgiveness, trying to explain my mother's state of mind. "She hasn't been right for years," he said in one message. "I should have gotten her help. This is my fault." I deleted every message without listening to the end. His guilt was his own burden to carry. He had made his bed when he chose to enable her instead of protecting his own daughter and grandson. A week after Leo was back, my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, came to visit. I was hesitant to let her in, wary of anyone connected to my mother, but she had a look of genuine sorrow on her face. "I am so sorry," she said as soon as I opened the door. "I had no idea. When your father called and said she was coming to visit with Leo, I thought it was strange you weren't with them, but I never imagined this." I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my mother had served me countless meals, and she told me things I had never known. She told me my mother had always been obsessive, even as a child. She told me about how my mother had a series of devastating miscarriages before she had me, and how she had always been terrified of losing me. "After you grew up and moved out, it was like she lost her purpose," Carol said, her eyes filled with tears. "And when Leo was born, I think she saw him as a second chance. A do-over. She convinced herself that she could do a better job this time." "She tried to steal my son, Carol," I said, my voice hard. "There is no excuse for that." "I know. she said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. I'm not making excuses. I just want you to know that you are not crazy. You didn't imagine this. There were warning signs and we all missed them, or ignored them. Her support was a small comfort, a confirmation that I wasn't the villain my mother had tried to paint me as. The legal process dragged on for months. My mother's psychiatric evaluation came back. It found that she suffered from narcissistic personality disorder and had delusional tendencies, but she was legally sane. She understood right from wrong. She was fit to stand trial. The trial was the hardest part. I had to testify. I had to sit in a courtroom, just a few feet away from her, and tell a jury of strangers about the most intimate and painful details of my life. She sat at the defense table, looking frail and small. She cried silently throughout my testimony. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw no remorse, only anger. She was angry that she had been caught. Her defense attorney tried to portray me as an ungrateful daughter who was trying to cut her loving grandmother out of her grandchild's life. He twisted my words, trying to make it seem like I was the one who was unreasonable. But Ms. Davies was brilliant. On cross-examination, she simply read from my mother's email. She showed the jury the list of her internet searches. The evidence was undeniable. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. They found her guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in a federal prison. 10 years. It felt like a lifetime. And yet, not nearly long enough. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. "You'll regret this," she mouthed. After the trial, my father approached me outside the courthouse. He looked 10 years older. "Is it over?" he asked. "For now," I said. "I'm going to sell the house," he said. "I can't live there anymore. Too many memories." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Can I see him? Can I see Leo?" I thought about it for a long moment. He had failed me. He had failed his grandson, but he was still Leo's grandfather. And Leo deserved to have some family left. "On my terms," I said. "Supervised visits, at the park, for 1 hour, once a week, and you will never, ever mention her to him." He nodded eagerly, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Anything. I'll do anything." It was a start. Maybe, in time, he could earn back a small piece of my trust. Life slowly found a new normal. I sold my house and moved to a new town with Sarah, who had been my rock through everything. I wanted a fresh start, a place with no memories of my mother. I got Leo into a wonderful new daycare, and I found a therapist for both of us. He had started having nightmares, waking up crying for his other mommy. It broke my heart every time. But slowly, with therapy and a lot of love and reassurance, the nightmares faded. I changed the decor in his new room. It was filled with bright, cheerful colors, planets, and dinosaurs. It was a room a little boy would love, a room chosen by his mother. I kept the supervised visits with my father. They were awkward at first, but for Leo's sake, I tried. My father was a different man. He was quiet, humbled. He never spoke of my mother. He just focused on playing with his grandson, his face filled with a sad, gentle love. About a year after she was sentenced, I got a letter from her in prison. The return address was a federal correctional facility. My first instinct was to burn it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It was not an apology. It was not a letter of remorse. It was a single sheet of paper, filled with her neat, precise handwriting. It was a list of parenting advice. Make sure Leo eats his vegetables. He needs a firmer bedtime. That daycare you have him in doesn't have a good enough rating. I read the first few lines and then I stopped. I couldn't read anymore. It was clear that prison had not changed her. In her mind, she was still the one in charge. She was still Leo's real mother, and I was just the incompetent fool who had gotten in her way. I tore the letter into tiny pieces and threw it in the trash. That night, as I tucked Leo into bed, he looked up at me with his big, trusting eyes. "I love you, Mama," he said, his little arms wrapped around my neck. I love you too, my sweet boy, I whispered, kissing his forehead. More than anything. As I watched him drift off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me for the first time in a long time. The fight was over. We were safe. My mother had tried to break us, to tear our little family apart, but she had failed. She had underestimated me. She saw me as a child, an extension of herself. But I was not a child anymore. I was a mother. And I had learned the most important lesson of all. I had learned how to protect my son, no matter the cost. She would never hurt us again. I would make sure of it. The weekly visits with my father continued. They were a strange ritual. We would meet at a public park halfway between my new home and his. He would bring a new toy for Leo every time, a small truck or a colorful ball. Leo, in his innocent, forgiving way, was always happy to see him. He would run into his grandfather's arms, and for an hour they would play on the swings or build castles in the sandbox. I would sit on a nearby bench, a book in my lap, pretending to read but never taking my eyes off them. My father never crossed the boundaries I had set. He never mentioned my mother. He never asked to take Leo anywhere alone. He was a model of contrition. But I could see the sadness in his eyes. He was a man haunted by his own weakness, by the years of looking the other way. One day, after about 6 months of these visits, he approached me as I was buckling Leo into his car seat. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I sighed. "We are talking." "No, I mean really talk," he said. "Just for a few minutes. Please." I looked at Leo, who was already engrossed in his new toy truck. I looked at my father's tired, pleading face. "Fine," I said. 5 minutes. We walked over to a bench a little ways away. He didn't sit down. He just stood in front of me, wringing his hands. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he began. "I know I failed you. I failed both of you. I see that now." "It's a little late, Dad," I said, my voice flat. "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "But I need you to understand. I was scared of her. I have been scared of her for a very long time. Her moods, her anger, it was always easier to just agree with her, to smooth things over." I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I wasn't. I was just letting her build her own little kingdom, where she was the queen and everyone else had to follow her rules. He paused, taking a shaky breath. "When you were a teenager, you two used to fight all the time. And every time I would tell you to just apologize, to just let it go. I thought I was teaching you to be the bigger person, but I was teaching you to be a doormat. I was teaching you to let her win. And I am so sorry for that." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the kidnapping. I saw the years of quiet fear and compromise etched into his face. I didn't feel forgiveness, not yet. But I felt a tiny sliver of understanding. He wasn't a monster like she was. He was just a weak man who had made a lifetime of bad choices. "What do you want from me, Dad?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head. I wanted to say that. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to understand why I let it all happen, and I'm trying to be a better man, a better grandfather." I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. It was all I could offer him. It would have to be enough. The letters from my mother kept coming, one every few months. I never opened them. I would see the prison stamp on the envelope and drop it straight into the shredder. Sarah thought I should keep them as evidence in case she ever tried to get parole, but I couldn't stand to have them in my house. They were like little pieces of poison, and I wanted them gone. Life with Leo was my focus. He was thriving. He was a happy, bright, funny little boy. He loved his daycare. He had a little gang of friends, and he was obsessed with dinosaurs. Sometimes I would watch him playing, so full of life and joy, and it would hit me all over again how close I had come to losing him. It was a chilling thought, a shadow that would probably follow me for the rest of my life. but I refused to let it consume me. I had to be strong for him. I went back to work, taking on more freelance projects. It felt good to have a purpose again, something that was just for me. Sarah and I fell into a comfortable routine, sharing a house, sharing meals, co-parenting Leo in a way. She was his Auntie Sarah, and he adored her. We were a strange little family, forged in trauma, but we were happy. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the button. Hello? Is this my daughter? The voice was weak and reedy, but I recognized it instantly. It was my mother. My blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? I demanded. Your father, she said. He finally accepted my call. He told me you had moved. There was an accusatory tone in her voice, as if I had betrayed her by trying to escape. You should not be calling me, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. We have nothing to talk about. I just want to know how my baby is, she said, her voice starting to take on that familiar, cloying sweetness. Is he eating well? Is he happy? He is not your baby, I snarled. He is my son, and he is fine. No thanks to you. You are so cruel, she whimpered. I am his grandmother. I have a right to know how he is. You have no rights, I said, my voice rising. You gave up all your rights when you put him in your car and drove across state lines. You are a convicted kidnapper. You are nothing to him. Do you understand me? Nothing. You will not keep him from me forever, she said, her voice suddenly turning hard and cold. It was the same voice I had heard in the park that day. When I get out of here, I will see him again. I will get a lawyer. I will fight for my rights. My heart is pounding. I feel the old fear creeping back in, but I push it down. I am not that scared girl anymore. Let me be very clear, I say, my voice low and steady. If you ever come near me or my son again, I will not hesitate. I will do whatever it takes to protect him. You will never, ever be alone with him again. I will spend every last cent I have to make sure of it. There is a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I hear a click. She has hung up. I stand in my kitchen, my phone clutched in my hand, my body trembling. The call has shaken me more than I want to admit. The threat, the delusion, the absolute lack of remorse. It's all still there. Prison has not changed her. She is just biding her time. I immediately called my father. He answered on the first ring. Did you give her my number? I screamed, not even waiting for him to say hello. There was a guilty silence. She sounded so sad, he stammered. She just wanted to know how Leo was. I didn't think it would hurt. You didn't think it would hurt? I shouted, my voice dripping with disbelief. Are you insane? She is a predator, Dad. And you just gave her a map to our new house? How could you be so stupid? I'm sorry, he mumbled. I made a mistake. This is more than a mistake, I said, my voice shaking with fury. This is a betrayal. The visits are over. I can't trust you. I can't have you in our lives if you are still in contact with her. You have to choose. It's her or us. That's not fair, he pleaded. She's my wife. And she is the woman who kidnapped your grandson. I shot back. The choice is yours. Let me know what you decide. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I couldn't afford to have a weak link in my defenses. He had proven once again that his loyalty to her would always trump his common sense and his love for me. The phone call from my mother was a wake-up call. I had been starting to feel safe, to let my guard down. But her threat reminded me that this was not over. It would never be truly over as long as she was alive. I went to see a lawyer the next day. I explained the situation, the conviction, the restraining order I already had in place. I told him about the phone call. We need to be prepared, I said. When she gets out, she's going to come for him. I know it. The lawyer, a kind older man named Mr. Thompson, listened patiently. He assured me that her chances of ever getting any kind of visitation rights were slim to none, given her criminal record. But, he said, it won't stop her from trying to harass you. We should send a formal cease and desist letter to her at the prison, demanding she stop all contact. If she violates it, it will only strengthen our case against her if she tries anything upon her release. He also suggested I start a journal, documenting every letter, every phone call, any form of contact she attempted. A clear record of harassment is your best weapon, he advised. I took his advice. I bought a locked journal and started writing everything down. The date of the phone call, the exact words she used, the subsequent call with my father. It felt proactive, like I was taking back some control. A few weeks later, my father showed up at my house unannounced. I saw him through the peephole, standing on my doorstep looking lost and broken. I didn't open the door. I spoke to him through the intercom. "What do you want?" I asked. "I chose," he said, his voice muffled through the speaker. "I chose you." I told her not to call me anymore. I told her I was done. I filed for divorce. I was stunned into silence. I had never in a million years expected him to do that. He had been married to her for over 30 years. His entire adult life had been lived in her shadow. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Let me see him. I miss him so much." I thought about it for a long time. He had made a terrible mistake, but he had also, finally, done the right thing. He had cut the cancer out. Maybe he deserved a second chance. A final chance. I opened the door. "The old rules still apply," I said. "Supervised visits? Here, at the house. And if you ever put him in danger again, you will never see either of us again. Am I clear?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Crystal clear," he said. "Thank you." From that day on, he became a fixture in our lives. He would come over every Sunday for dinner. He would play with Leo in the backyard, pushing him on the swing I had installed, helping him build elaborate Lego creations. He was quiet and respectful, and he never overstepped. He was trying, really trying, to atone for his past. And slowly, painstakingly, I began to forgive him. I saw the man he could have been if he hadn't spent his life enabling a narcissist. The years passed. Leo started kindergarten. He lost his first tooth. He learned to ride a bike. He was a happy, well-adjusted child. The shadow of his grandmother faded into the background, a scary story from a life he barely remembered. I continued my therapy, working through the layers of trauma and betrayal. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, but eventually. I met a wonderful man, Mark. He was kind and patient, and he understood my past without judgment. He loved Leo as his own. When Leo was 8 years old, I got a letter from the parole board. My mother was up for early release. They cited good behavior and her participation in prison therapy programs. They were required to notify me, as the victim, and I was given the opportunity to submit a statement. Panic seized me. It was too soon. She had only served 6 years of her 10-year sentence. I immediately called Ms. Davies, the prosecutor, who had become a trusted ally over the years. She was just as outraged as I was. "This is a joke," she said. "Her good behavior in a controlled environment means nothing. She's a master manipulator. She's just telling them what they want to hear." Together, we drafted my victim impact statement. I wrote about the lasting trauma, the nightmares Leo still had occasionally, the constant fear I lived with that she would come back. I included the details of her phone call from prison, the threat she had made. I attached a copy of the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent. I begged them not to release her. I told them she was still a danger to my child. My father wrote a statement too. In it, he detailed her years of controlling and manipulative behavior, admitting his own role in enabling her. He wrote that he believed, without a doubt, that if released, she would try to harm our family again. We sent our statements and we waited. The weeks leading up to the parole hearing were excruciating. I couldn't sleep. I jumped at every noise. I found myself watching Leo with a new, frantic intensity, as if she could materialize out of thin air and snatch him away. Mark was my anchor, holding me when I broke down, reassuring me that we were safe, that we would face this together. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. We weren't allowed to be there in person, so we just had to wait for the call. My father came over, and the three of us, me, Mark, and my dad, sat in my living room in tense silence, my phone on the coffee table between us. The call came in the late afternoon. It was a victim's advocate from the parole board. "I have the board's decision," she said, her voice professional and devoid of emotion. "After reviewing the case file and the statement submitted, parole has been denied." A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. I collapsed back into the sofa, tears of gratitude streaming down my face. Mark wrapped his arms around me, and my father put his head in his hands and sobbed. We had done it. We had kept her where she belonged. The advocate continued. The board noted the non-remorseful nature of the crime and the credible threat of reoffense. She will not be eligible for parole again for another 2 years. 2 more years of peace. 2 more years of safety. It was a victory. After that, the letters from prison stopped. My father's divorce was finalized. He sold their old house and bought a small condo near us. He was a doting grandfather, present for every school play and baseball game. Our little family, once broken, had healed into a new shape. We were scarred, but we were strong. When my mother's full sentence was finally up, Leo was 12 years old. He was a smart, funny preteen, more interested in video games and his friends than in the distant, vague memory of a mean grandma. The day of her release came and went. I had expected something. A phone call, a letter, a strange car parked down the street. But there was nothing, just silence. The silence was, in its own way, more unnerving than the threats. Where was she? What was she planning? My old anxieties flared up. I made sure Leo's school was aware of the situation. I gave them her picture and told them she was not, under any circumstances, allowed on school property or to pick him up. I had the stranger danger talk with Leo again, reminding him never to go anywhere with anyone he didn't know, no matter what they said. He rolled his eyes. "I know, Mom. You've told me 1,000,000 times." He didn't understand the depth of my fear, and I was glad. I had fought so hard to give him a normal, happy childhood, and I had succeeded. Months went by, and still nothing. I started to relax again. Maybe she had moved on. Maybe she had realized she had lost. My father heard through the grapevine via Aunt Carol that my mother had moved to a different state, somewhere far away. She was living in a small apartment, working a menial job. She had told Carol she wanted a fresh start and to leave the past behind. I didn't believe it for a second, but the distance was a comfort. Then, on Leo's 13th birthday, a package arrived. It was a large, brightly wrapped box with no return address. My name and address were written in a familiar, neat script. My heart stopped. It was from her. Mark saw the look on my face. "What is it?" "It's from her," I whispered. "Throw it out," he said immediately. "We don't have to open it." He was right. I should have thrown it out. But a morbid curiosity, a need to know what new form her manipulation was taking, made me pick it up. I took it out to the garage and carefully opened it. Inside was a brand new, expensive gaming system, the exact one Leo had been begging for months. There was a card tucked inside. I opened it. "To my darling grandson," it read. "I know your mother won't let me see you, but I will always love you and I will always be watching over you. I hope you like this. Happy birthday. Love, your real grandma." The words "real grandma" were underlined 3 times, and the phrase "I will always be watching over you" sent a shiver of pure ice down my spine. This wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It was a message. A message that she was still out there, that she was still obsessed, and that she knew what my son wanted. How did she know? Had she been talking to someone? Had she been online, tracking his interests? I put the gaming system back in the box, drove it to an electronics recycling center, and dropped it off. I didn't tell Leo about it. I didn't want to scare him. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words echoing in my head. I will always be watching. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I gave him her name, her last known address, and a recent photo I had gotten from her prison file. I need to know what she's doing, I told him. I need to know if she's a threat. He called me a week later. I found her, he said. She's living about an hour away from you. My blood ran cold. What? No, that's impossible. My aunt said she moved to another state. She lied, the investigator said. She's been living in a town called Northwood for the past 6 months. She's working as a cashier at a grocery store. She keeps to herself mostly. But there's something else you should know. What? I asked, dreading the answer. She's been volunteering at the local community center, the one right next to your son's middle school. The world tilted on its axis. She was close. She had been close for months. She had been watching him. That's how she knew about the gaming system. She had probably seen him with his friends, overheard him talking. The audacity, the sheer terrifying obsession of it, left me breathless. What do I do? I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. The restraining order is still in effect, he said. She hasn't violated it yet, not directly. She hasn't approached him or contacted you other than the package. But this is a clear pattern of stalking. You need to go back to the police. You need to get the order extended and the terms expanded to include a geographical restriction. A judge will not look kindly on this behavior. That afternoon, I was back at the police station, a place I had hoped I would never have to see again. I had the investigator's report. I had the birthday card. I had a new, fierce determination burning in my chest. She had made a mistake. She had overplayed her hand. And now I was going to use it to bury her for good. I would not let this woman terrorize my family for one more day. The game was over. And I was going to win.